Lesson 30, Creating Worksheets. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to add new worksheets on the fly, and we'll use object variables to keep track of the various worksheets. Let's get started. Okay, so we have a data set here, and I'm interested in getting all of the Z product records over to a brand new worksheet. So let's just talk about how we would do that in Excel. Of course, we would add a new worksheet here, give it a nice name like service, maybe add a title, service revenue, copy the headings. And in order for me to copy the headings, watch, I'm going to actually go select the data worksheet, select those headings, Control C to copy, go to the service worksheet and Control V to paste. And then I'm going to be going back and forth between the various worksheets. So I actually select the data worksheet, Control C, and then go to service and paste in the next row. Go back to the data worksheet, select the next row, Control C, and the service worksheet, Control V, and so on. And so I'm going to basically end up selecting data and service once for every different line in the original data set that has a Z. The great thing about VBA is that we can do all of this without switching back and forth between the worksheets. We're going to set up a couple of object variables, one to refer to the data worksheet and one to refer to the new service worksheet. And with those object variables set up, we can easily copy data from one to the other without selecting the worksheet. It really doesn't matter whether we're on the data worksheet or the service worksheet. The VBA can access records from either worksheet and move them to a spot on the other worksheet. It's all very efficient code. Now, I've started this macro already, so we'll click on Visual Basic. And I've defined a couple of variables that I want to use. Now, all of my worksheet variables always start with WS, and then I add one letter to help me remember which it is. So in this case, I have WSD, which is the data worksheet, and then WSR, which is going to be the report worksheet. These are just variables that I use in a standard fashion. WSD meaning the place where the original data is, WSR meaning the place where I'm creating the nice formatted report. Some other variables that I use sometime will be WSO for the original worksheet and WSN for the new worksheet. Now, certainly that would work here as well, but we have WSD and WSR. I've added a few comments throughout. We want to add a new worksheet to this workbook. We want to rename that new worksheet and set up titles. I'm going to loop through all records on WSD, and when I find a product Z, I'm going to copy to the next row. And then finally, near the end, I'm going to make sure to activate WSR. So WSR.select. Notice that I don't care what the active sheet is throughout the process. When I add that new worksheet here, I don't know if that new worksheet will be selected or not, and I really don't care because I'm going to keep referring to WSD and WSR throughout. And when we refer to the sheet, it doesn't need to be the active sheet. This actually makes your code much more efficient because Excel doesn't have to bother switching between the worksheets. It doesn't have to bother drawing the data worksheet and then the report worksheet. Data, report, data, report. That takes a lot of overhead to redraw that on the screen. And really, when the macro is running, we don't need to see it be redrawn on the screen. We only care about it after the report is finished. So this is a much faster way to go. Okay, to add a new worksheet to this workbook, we use worksheets.add. So worksheets is the collection of all worksheets in the active workbook, worksheets.add. And you'll see that there's a few arguments here, one called before and one called after. And this controls where we add the new worksheet. And so if I want to add a worksheet after the current worksheet, I could say after worksheets 1. Or I could say after worksheets data. That'll ensure that it shows up right after the worksheets data. Okay, so the macro is far from finished, but I want to take a look at this macro and how it works when we run just these first few lines of code. And so you see that we start out here on the data worksheet. As I start to run the macro, I press F8, F8, and then here, this line of code, worksheets.add after worksheets data. Okay, so it adds a brand new worksheet. it makes it the active worksheet, and it gives it a name, like sheet 3. Now I'll stop this code and I'll run it again, and we get worksheets.add. Now sheet 4 shows up. And really, you have very little control over these sheet names. It just numbers them sequentially, and if someone had previously inserted a sheet during the session, that sheet might have been sheet 2, and then we get sheet 3, and then sheet 4. And so it's one of those slightly confusing things because we're not sure what the name of the new worksheet is. We can take advantage of the fact that it becomes the active sheet. And so one route here is to say set WSR equal to active sheet. And then whatever that sheet's name happens to be, it'll be assigned to the object variable of WSR. However, there's a great shortcut for this. So worksheets.add creates a new object. It's a new worksheet. And we can combine these two lines of code into one line of code if you understand one small technical detail. We can say here set WSR equal to worksheets.add. But when we do this, when we take the result of worksheets.add and assign it to an object variable, VBA requires us to use parentheses. So this will be the time when we have to add a parenthesis after add and a closing parenthesis at the end of our arguments. And we can then get rid of this line of code. All right, so let's take a look at how this works. I'll delete these extra worksheets here. Switch back to VBA, and when I start to run the code, this one line here, WSR, will add the worksheet, and it's already assigned to the object variable. All right, so that's a great time saver, just setting up the object variable to be the result of the worksheets.add. All right, so let's go on and finish the rest of the code here. We want to rename the worksheet and set up titles, so we say WSR.name equals service, and then WSR.cells 1, 1, that's going to be the title, equals service report. Maybe we want that cell to have a larger font size. All right. We want to copy our headings from row 1 of the data worksheet and put them on row 3 of the service worksheet. So WSD dot range A1 to E1 dot copy. Destination is WSD dot cells 1 or 3, 1. That'll copy those rows over, and then I'm going to set up a variable here on the fly called next row equals 4. That means that the next Z record that we find is going to move to row 4. All right, so we have our loop, and we've talked about loops a lot, so I already put this code in. Final row equals WSD. So go look on the data worksheet, start at the last row, press end, XL up, and see what row you end up on. And then we're going to loop from 2 to final row. Now note that while this macro is running, the WSD worksheet will not be the active worksheet, but that does not matter. Excel is going to deal with this just fine. It can look back to the data worksheet without making it be the active worksheet. When we find a matching record, well, we're going to take the data from WSD. So which row do we want? Well, we want the row from the loop control variable I, 1. I'll resize 1 row, 5 columns, and do a copy. And then the destination is WSR. We're copying it to the report worksheet. Dot cells next row, 1. Now, every time that we copy a record over, we want to make sure the next record ends up in a new row. So next row equals next row plus 1. All right, there's our loop. When we're completely done, then we want to make sure that we select WSR, and then I report a little message box here, and I build the message box to be dynamic. So I know next row I'm going to subtract the 3 rows, the title, the blank row, the heading, and actually as I think about that, I need to subtract 1 more row, and then concatenate that with the message. Service records copied to the service report. If you want to be a little clever about this, you can put title equals MrExcel.com. You can advertise, who you are, so that way you don't forget the person who generously wrote this report for you. Little self-promotion there. Okay, so we have our report here. Let's go through it step by step. At first, we press F8. We see the new worksheet get added with the name of sheet 6. After this line of code, it renames that worksheet to be service, and then puts the title in, makes the title larger. There. Copies the headings over. Now you'll notice that we don't ever see the data worksheet. The headings just automatically show up. Oh, they didn't show up. Okay, well, that's bad. So I had an error here. This should be WSR. WSR. And we'll click stop because we had a problem. And if I go back here, you'll see that we actually wrote the headings right onto the worksheet. This is a great reason why we should save all the time. We should always save before we create this. So I'm going to save as, file save as, macro enabled workbook. I'll save it in the post folder, lesson 30 partial, and then go back and reopen lesson 30 so that way I can recover that one record that I overwrote. So we'll copy and then paste. Alright, so we'll close lesson 30. We're now here in lesson 30 partial. Alright, this is you get too confident with these macros and you end up creating problems like that. So it's always good to save the workbook before you start to run anything. Alright, we'll get rid of the service here and we'll start to run again. So we'll press F8, F8, F8. There's the new worksheet added. It gets renamed, service report, the font size, and now we expect to see the headings show up in row 3. There they are, beautiful. Next row. Alright, so now we have the loop, and it's going to go through several different records. I really don't need to watch that after the first one. So we'll go down a few rows, watch the first record come over. Yep, that looks good. And so now at this point, I don't need to watch the rest of the things in the loop. I'm going to click on this line and use debug and say run to cursor. So that basically goes through, looks at all the different invoices over on the data worksheet and copies the Z records to the service worksheet. Now at this point, this line is actually redundant because we already are on WSR, but that's okay. I just want to make sure that, sometimes doing a copy and a paste in two separate statements will select the worksheet to which you're pasting. And so it's just making sure that at some point in the future, something here ends up selecting WSD, that we end up back at the original WSR worksheet where we want to be. And then the message box appears and says 8 service records copied to the service report. So click OK. Alright, so there you have it. We did several things in this macro. We were able to create a brand new worksheet on the fly and then go through looping and creating many more worksheets. While we're talking about creating worksheets on the fly, let's say that you had a list of departments or a list of products or something like that. So let me just create product 1, and I'll grab the fill handle and drag. And say that we had to go through the tedious process of creating 15 new worksheets, 15 new worksheets. That. And renaming them all. That would be a hassle to click the insert worksheet icon, rename, click the insert worksheet, rename. Just a great quick little utility macro here that you can knock out in just a few seconds is called sub create many worksheets. For each cell in selection, this WS is equal to cell.value, and we're going to add a new worksheet. Worksheets.add after? Well, I want to add it to the end. I just want to go to the end. And so I say after worksheets. And here in the index number, I'm going to then say worksheets.count. And then active sheet dot name equals this WS. And then next cell. All right, so here I have, it doesn't matter how many items I have in the selection. I have 15 items in the selection. I will run this worksheet and watch the tabs along the left-hand side. At the bottom, very quickly, we're able to create several new worksheets, all in order at the end, using all of those names. So just a tiny little bit of code. If I have the process of having to create many different worksheets, well, rather than creating each one, I can use this little 5-line macro. And it's not something I store in my personal macro workbook, although I could. When I need to do this, it's easy enough just to come here and knock these 5 lines of code out and add new worksheets on the fly. The trick is we always want to add it to the end, so I use worksheets.count, and that changes as the macro is running. If we started with 3 worksheets, the first time it's going to say after worksheet 3, but then after we've added 5 worksheets and we now have 8 worksheets, it's going to say add it after worksheet 8, and it always gets added to the end of the list. Great little utility macro that uses this concept of doing worksheets.add. Well, in the next lesson, we're going to take this one step further where we add a new workbook on the fly. In this lesson, we created a new worksheet right in the current workbook, but sometimes we want to create many different workbooks on the fly, and we'll take a look at how to create new workbooks and save each one. That way you can take one report and create many reports from it using a simple macro. Thanks for watching this lesson. I hope you found this helpful.
Looking to advance your career by acquiring new skills? Tired of expensive off-site training programs? Wish you could learn from the best instructors in the industry? Look no further than Live Lessons. Self-paced, personal video instruction by the world's leading technology publishers. Each live lesson comes with a DVD featuring 3 to 4 hours of instructor-led classroom training, sample program code that allows you to work along with your personal instructor, and an example-rich study guide. Live lessons allow you to watch the entire course from start to finish, or navigate directly to any of the individual lessons. You'll literally watch over the shoulder of your instructor as he shows you how to build state-of-the-art applications. Live Lessons, the power of the world's leading technology experts at your fingertips. To learn more, visit mylivelessons.com today.